My name is Russell Kavanagh. I'm 58 years old, and 6 months ago, my son-in-law stood in my own kitchen and told me I had a choice: cook for his dinner meetings or find somewhere else to live. I didn't shout. I didn't slam a single cupboard door. I went down to the basement suite, the one they called Dad's apartment, like it was a gift instead of a converted laundry room, and I packed my truck in under an hour. I drove out of Kelowna before the sun was fully up. 9 days later, my phone showed 41 missed calls. Let me back up, because none of it started with cruelty. It started, the way these things usually do, with what looked like love. It was the March after my wife Joan passed that my daughter Pamela called me. I was still living in the house in Penticton, the one Joan and I bought in '94, with a mortgage that took us 18 years to pay off and a garden she'd spent 2 decades getting exactly right. Pamela's voice on the phone had that particular warmth she got when she wanted something to sound like it wasn't a request. "Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around that big house alone. Come stay with us. We just finished the basement. It's basically its own suite." I'd spent 30 years running a small engineering firm in the Okanagan, mostly residential foundations, retaining walls, the occasional commercial job. I knew how to read a structure, how to spot where the load was actually going, versus where the blueprint said it should go. I should have applied the same instinct to my own family. I didn't. I heard "come stay with us," and all I could think about was not eating dinner alone again at that long table built for 4. I sold the Penticton house in May. Took less than I should have, because the realtor said spring was the season, and I didn't have the patience to wait for a better offer. I kept Joan's garden tools. Couldn't bring myself to leave them behind, even though I had no garden waiting for me in Kelowna. They've been sitting in a Rubbermaid bin in the back of my truck for 6 months now. My son-in-law, Connor Beck, met me in the driveway the day I moved in. Good handshake, good eye contact, the kind of confidence you get from a man who'd built a property management company from nothing by the age of 38. "Russell, glad you're here. The suite downstairs has its own entrance, so you've got your privacy," he said. Privacy the way some men say space, like it was generosity instead of distance. The suite was nice enough. A bedroom, a small sitting area, a kitchenette that I'd later realize was mostly decorative, because nobody actually expected me to cook for myself down there. They expected me upstairs, in their kitchen, most evenings. It didn't happen all at once. The first week, I made dinner because I felt useless otherwise, and it seemed like the kind thing to do, contributing something for the roof over my head. Connor came home from showing rental units at 6:30 sharp, sat down, ate, said "Good one, Russ," and went to his office to work. He didn't ask. He also didn't not ask. It just became the shape of the evening. By the second week, it was assumed. By the third, Pamela started texting me from work. "Dad, can you start the chicken around 5? We've got a client thing at 7. And I'd answer "sure thing" before I'd even thought about whether I wanted to. I want to be honest about something. I liked being useful again. After 35 years married to a woman who could fill any silence in a room, the quiet after she passed had nearly flattened me. Being needed, even in this small, lopsided way, felt like air. It was Connor's habit with his laundry that first made something in me go cold and watchful. I'd notice his dress shirts appear folded on top of the dryer. Fine, he'd done that himself. But then, a Thursday in June, there was a pile of his gym clothes sitting outside my suite door. Not in the hamper. Not in the laundry room. Outside my door like I was staff in a hotel. No note, no ask. I washed them, told myself it was a one-off. It wasn't. By July, I'd stopped going to my Wednesday curling night at the club, because Pamela would catch me at the door with my bag and say, "Connor's got investors coming for a barbecue. Can you stay and help with the burgers?" 3 times running. The 4th time, I didn't even ask. I just put my jacket back on the hook before she said a word, because I already knew the question. Connor's mother, Marion, came up from Victoria in August for a long weekend. Pleasant enough woman, brought a tin of her own shortbread, admired the deck Connor had built. Over dinner, which I'd made naturally, a roast with all the sides, she told a story about Connor's father, how he never once had to think about a hot meal, how she'd always just handled it. It was my pleasure, really. She smiled at me when she said it, like she was passing me a torch I hadn't asked to carry. That night, through the floor vent that ran between the basement and the kitchen above, I heard Connor's voice, low. "Mom never made it a thing, you know. She just did it." Pamela murmured something I couldn't catch. I sat on the edge of my bed with a glass of water going warm in my hand and understood, with the particular clarity that comes late at night. that I was being measured against a standard I hadn't agreed to. I tried once to say something to Pamela directly, found her folding laundry, her own for once, in the upstairs hallway, and asked if she thought I was doing too much. She frowned at me like I'd asked something in a foreign language. Dad, Connor's never once been rude to you. What's the problem? That was the whole defense. No rudeness, therefore no complaint allowed. I thought about the gym clothes outside my door, about curling night, about the word convenient Connor had used the day he showed me the suite. Close to the laundry room, convenient. And I understood that politeness had become the entire moral standard in that house, and I had been quietly failing a different one nobody would name. The thing that finally cracked it open was Connor's promotion. He'd been pushing for regional director at his firm for 2 years, overseeing 4 offices instead of 1, a real jump, and in October he got it. Pamela threw her arms around him in the kitchen, the way you do when you're genuinely happy for someone, and for a second I was glad for them both. That part, at least, was real. Connor wanted to celebrate with people who mattered to his career. A dinner, Saturday 14 guests, including his regional VP, a man named Philip Aldridge who was flying in from Calgary specifically for it. Dad, you'll cook, right? You're so good at this, Pamela said, like it had never been a question. I set down the dish towel I was holding. Cook it, or help plan it. She blinked, the way people do when something they'd assumed gets said out loud. Cook it, obviously. And will I be sitting at the table? The flicker that crossed her face wasn't guilt exactly. It was closer to embarrassment that I'd made her say the quiet part. It's mostly Connor's coworkers, people he wants to impress. It might be a little, I don't know, awkward with you serving and sitting both. Awkward. I picked the dish towel back up. Sure, I said. I'll handle it. But something in me had already shifted, quiet and absolute, the way a foundation shifts before anyone above ground notices the crack in the drywall. The menu came by text from Connor on Monday, 6 courses. Salmon, a beef tenderloin as the main, a wild rice pilaf, roasted root vegetables, a charcuterie starter, and, a note added Tuesday, Philip's a big fan of duck confit if you can swing it. He didn't ask if I'd ever made duck confit. I had, twice, years back for Joan's 40th. He had no way of knowing that, and never thought to ask. Wednesday, Pamela came down to the suite with the kind of careful cheerfulness people use when they're asking for something larger than they're pretending it is. Dad, would it be easier if you just stayed down here in the kitchen during the party, like manage things back there? You wouldn't have to deal with making conversation with people you don't know. Easier for who? I asked. She smoothed her sleeve, didn't quite meet my eyes. It would just flow better. Connor's people don't really know you, and I don't want it to feel. She didn't finish. I had raised this woman, driven her to swim lessons at 6 in the morning for 4 winters straight, sat in the front row at her university convocation in Kamloops in the pouring rain, and now I was being asked to disappear in a house where I cooked 5 nights out of 7. I understand, I said. I didn't argue. Arguing wasn't going to be the thing that fixed this. Thursday night, Pamela came down again while I was prepping, going through my checklist for the duck. Connor was out with the regional team. She stood near the kitchenette counter, unusually quiet for her. Tomorrow's important to Connor, she said finally, careful like she'd rehearsed it. I need everything to go smoothly. I need you focused. Just on the food. Don't come up front. Don't talk to the guests. A pause. And honestly, if that's going to be hard for you, maybe it's better if you just stayed somewhere else this weekend. Take a break. Take a break. She'd wrapped it in concern like she was doing me a kindness. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. 31 years old, standing in my temporary kitchen, telling her father to either work in silence or vanish, and somehow making it sound thoughtful. I turned off the burner under the stock I had going. All right, I said. I understand. I went into my room and closed the door. At 11 that night, I pulled my duffel bag out from under the bed. I'd never bothered unpacking the bottom layer, books mostly, a habit I hadn't examined until just then. I packed the rest the way Joan always said I packed, methodical, nothing rushed. There were things I left behind. The apron I'd bought at a kitchen shop on Bernard Avenue my second week there, I hung back on its hook by the stove. The spare fob for the garage I left on the counter, and 1 sheet of paper, folded once, on the cutting board, with a single line I'd thought about for longer than it took to write. I cooked because I loved you. I won't serve out of fear. I hope Saturday goes the way you need it to. I called my younger daughter, Heather, in Vancouver, just after 11:30. She picked up on the second ring, same as always. Dad, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm leaving in the morning. Can you find me somewhere to stay just for a few nights? A beat. Already looking. That was Heather. No drama, no third degree. She trusted me the way Pamela used to, before things got complicated by what she needed from me instead of who I was. I set my alarm for 6. Didn't sleep much, but it wasn't dread keeping me up. It was the specific, alert stillness of a man who's finally made a decision and is just waiting for daylight to act on it. Saturday morning, the house was quiet in that particular way. Houses are when nobody else is awake yet. I carried my bag up the basement stairs in 2 trips so the wheels wouldn't bang on the steps. Connor's car was already gone. Saturday morning hockey with some buddies, the one routine of his that had nothing to do with anyone else's schedule. Pamela's door upstairs stayed shut. I set my bag in the front hall, walked back to the kitchen one more time. The note was where I'd left it. The apron on its hook. Morning light coming low through the window over the sink, catching the edge of the cutting board, the prep bowls I'd stacked the night before. The duck was still curing in the fridge. I picked up my keys. I didn't look back at the basement door on my way out. The drive to the hotel out by the airport took 11 minutes. I checked in, set my bag on the rack, sat on the edge of the bed, and did something I hadn't done in 5 months. Nothing. No list. No one needing a plate. I sat in a room that was entirely mine and breathed slow, the kind of breath you take when you realize how long you'd been holding the last one. I turned my phone off. For the day, that felt like enough. I wasn't there for the party, but I know roughly how it went, because my friend Garth Pellerin told me the next morning over coffee. Garth and I had played in the same Wednesday curling league for 9 years. He'd known Joan since before I did, in a roundabout way, through her sister. He'd been invited to the party. Pamela liked him, always had, and he went, mostly, he told me later, because something about the whole evening had felt off to him for weeks, and he wanted to see it for himself. The kitchen, he said, was dark when guests started arriving. No smell of duck, no trays in the warming drawer. Pamela found the note around 5:40, then the apron, and stood at the counter for what he guessed was a full 5 minutes before she picked up her phone and ordered 3 large pizzas from the place on Harvey Avenue. By 6:30, Connor was working the room with his usual ease, shaking Philip Aldridge's hand at the door, the kind of grip a man practices. "Smells like, wait, is dinner still coming?" Philip asked, glancing toward the kitchen. "Change of plans," Connor said. "Smooth as anything. Pizza. Keeps it casual." Philip didn't say much to that. He's apparently not a man who shows his hand quickly. But a little later, making conversation, he asked, genuinely curious. "Pamela mentioned her dad does a lot of the cooking around here. Is he joining us tonight?" Connor's smile held. "He took the weekend. Needed some time to himself. He just moved here, didn't he? Already traveling. He's independent. Comes and goes." Garth was standing close enough to hear all of it, and he'd had coffee with me 3 weeks earlier, where I'd told him more than I'd told anyone. The gym clothes outside the door, the curling nights I'd given up, the word awkward. He hadn't said much at the time, just listened, the way some men do instead of offering advice. He set his glass down. "Russell left this morning, actually," he said, to no one in particular and everyone at once. The little cluster near the fireplace went still the way a room does when somebody says something true out loud by accident. "Is everything all right?" Philip asked. "He's fine, staying at a hotel." Garth's voice didn't rise. Last night, Pamela told him he could work at the kitchen out of sight during the party, or take the weekend somewhere else. He chose somewhere else. Connor's jaw moved once. He started to say something. "Garth, I appreciate you looking out for him, but this isn't really." And Philip cut him off, gently, just by lifting a hand. "We don't need to get into it tonight," Philip said, calm in that way that costs nothing and lands heavy anyway. He touched Connor's arm once and turned back toward the drinks table. That was all. No scene. But Garth said something in the room rearranged itself permanently right then. The way furniture does when you finally see the whole layout of a place you've been living in blind. The party went on, technically. People ate pizza off paper plates because Pamela couldn't find the good napkins fast enough. Philip stayed another half hour, mentioned his grandson's hockey tournament, said a perfectly warm goodnight to Connor on his way out, which told Connor everything and nothing, all at once. Monday morning, Connor walked into his new regional office expecting the start of something. The title was already on his email signature. He ran into Philip near the elevators around 9. "Morning," Philip said. Same words, different weight behind the eyes. They'd had a standing Monday lunch for the better part of a year. They didn't go that week. When I turned my phone back on Sunday afternoon, the screen took a moment to organize itself into meaning. 41 missed calls, 28 from Pamela, 6 from Connor, 4 from numbers I didn't recognize that turned out later to be mutual friends Pamela had apparently enlisted to track me down, and 3 from Garth, the last one a voicemail. Just checking you're all right. You are. Call me when you're ready, not before. I didn't call anyone back that first day. I drove to a property management office near the airport instead. Different company than Connor's, which felt important somehow, and asked about one-bedroom rentals. By Wednesday I'd signed a lease on a place on the west side, 600 square feet, a kitchen window that looked out at a row of birch trees instead of a parking lot. Heather flew in from Vancouver that Saturday. She walked through the apartment, running her hand along the counter, testing the window latch, the way she does everything, thorough, unhurried. Good light, she said. You could put a reading chair right there. We spent the afternoon at a second-hand furniture place on Ellis Street. I bought a table, 2 chairs, a bookshelf. She kept trying to add things, a side table, a coat rack, and I kept saying no, I only wanted what I'd actually chosen, that I'd fill the place slowly, the way you fill a life you're actually living instead of one you've been handed. At a hardware store that afternoon, I found a small pegboard kit near the entrance. The same style Joan used to have mounted in our old garage for her trowels and shears. I bought it, mounted it myself above a little workbench I set up by the window, and finally took the Rubbermaid bin out of the truck. Different tools than hers, but mine, hanging where I could see them. 3 weeks after the party, Pamela called and asked if she could come by. She showed up with a folded note in her coat pocket, the fold gone soft from being carried around. She sat across from me at my new little table and didn't perform anything. No speech prepared in advance. Dad, I'm sorry, she said. I waited. Joan used to tell me the gap after an apology is where the truth lives. For what exactly? I asked. She took a breath. I saw what was useful about you being there, and I told myself that was the same as loving you. I think I was scared to look at it any closer because if I did, I'd have to look at some other things too. She didn't finish that sentence. She didn't need to. I love you, Pamela, I said. That hasn't changed, but I'm not living that way again. Not for you, not for anyone. She nodded. Her eyes were wet. She didn't argue with it. That, by itself, was something. Connor called the Friday after that, just after 8 in the evening. I was in my new chair with a coffee and a book, and I let it ring twice before I picked up. Mr. Kavanagh, he said. He'd never called me that in 5 months. It had always been Russell, which I'd accepted because correcting it would have meant a conversation neither of us wanted. He didn't apologize, not directly. Men like Connor don't always have the vocabulary ready, but he was quieter than I'd ever heard him, the particular quiet of someone sitting with something they didn't expect to feel. I didn't think it would go like this, he said. I know, I said. There was a long pause and I almost let it end there. But there was one thing I wanted said while the line was still open. Connor, the part I actually care about isn't what happened between you and me. It's that my daughter felt like she couldn't tell you the truth about anything without there being a cost to it. That's the part I need you to sit with. He didn't answer right away. Then the call ended. He never called again, and I didn't expect him to. But I meant it, and the way you mean a thing sometimes, it lands somewhere, whether or not the other person's ready to hear it. These days I'm in a curling league 2 nights a week, instead of skipping one out of guilt, and I joined a small woodworking group that meets Thursdays in a community hall off Lakeshore. 6 or 7 us around a long bench, the particular kind of quiet that comes from people working with their hands instead of their worry. The man who runs it, a retired electrician named Pete, handed me safety glasses my first night and said, "Wood doesn't care who you are, it just answers to how you work it." I think about that more than I expected to. Looking back, what I understand now is that I mistook being needed for being loved. They can live in the same house, sometimes they even share a kitchen table, but they aren't the same thing. And when one quietly replaces the other, what's left isn't family anymore. It's a transaction wearing the right words. I don't regret going to Kelowna. I don't even regret the 5 months, not entirely. They taught me I still had it in me to walk out of a situation that wasn't right, and that 58 is not too old to take a life back. If you're in something that's been asking you to make yourself smaller than you are, you don't have to win the argument first. Sometimes you just pack the truck, quietly, steadily, and drive.